Hyperindependence and its impact on women's wellness. That is what I'm going to be diving into today with our guest, Shantae Worsham L. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because there is such a huge movement right now on women removing the superwoman cape. One of the causes or one of the contributors that keeps our superwoman cape on is hyper independence. And a lot of people are not talking about hyper independence. So Shantae Worsham L, she has done work around hyper independence and its connection to trauma. And I'm excited to have her here today to really go deeper into this topic of hyper independence. So Shantae, if you could introduce yourself, how you came, to your work in providing trauma therapy. And, also if you could even describe what is hyper independence.
Yes, yes. So first and foremost, thank you for having me, Kamisha. Thank you everyone for joining us and having a conversation about this super important topic. I came into this work because it was more of a calling than it was I guess it's purpose and calling, right? And so when I was a young girl, I had three foster parents or three parents, family members who were foster parents, and seeing all the different teenagers moving from home to home and having conversations with them in conjunction with the trauma that I experienced in my youth, witnessing all of this and the different manifestations really made me curious. And so when I was about 13 or 14 years old, I laid awake asking God why I was experiencing what I was experiencing. I was flying underneath the radar, even though there was anxiety, depression, and PTSD. I had good manners, grades were doing well, so none of the adults noticed I was challenged. But the answer I got was to help children like yourself. And then as I got into the field, I learned that this is called trauma or overwhelming stress, and that we were also going to be healing the inner child of adults, right? Initially, I trained as a child and adolescent therapist and began working with adults about 12 years ago more heavily, and understanding that there's such an inner child in us that we're all navigating. And that simply comes up when we're navigating day to day experiences like challenges with our colleagues, work related stress, financial stressors, etc. And so I myself am a very proud woman and have an affinity for women. While I love all humans, I do believe that women are the cornerstone of humanity, and the backbone of humanity. And that when we are well, then humanity heals, right? And so when we heal, humanity is healing. So at Lotus Trauma Care, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Lotus Trauma Care. We specialize in trauma, healing, and therapy. We also provide yoga and trauma resources as well. We provide over 7,500 therapy sessions, 75% of which were with BIPOC women. And so it's always been such an honor and such a beautiful, humbling, and sacred experience to watch the growth and the healing and the vulnerability, right? Breaking down the barriers of hyperindependence. And so your question too, what is hyperindependence? This is this over self-reliance, right? When we are sober reliant on ourselves to the point where we are unable to engage in that human interdependence, right? Where we need that human connection, we need support, but instead our experiences has caused us to believe or to feel unsafe to engage in that vulnerability or in that co-regulation and collaboration that can happen in human experiences.
Well, thank you so much for the work that you do because it's so important. And just the connection to trauma, and then how hyper independence, the self reliance, how that shows up and how it gets in the way of experiencing interdependence, which is would be considered maybe a more beneficial way to receive support in the world. Could you share a little bit more about what are some of the reasons why women may engage in hyper independence? What are maybe some examples of experiences that can lead to being engaged in hyper independence as a woman?
Yes. So that primary reason is an attempt to create safety and predictability. If I can rely on myself and I know that I'm going to get this done or that's going to happen, then there's some type of predictability happening in our environments. And so we see that oftentimes complex trauma or developmental trauma, which is the overwhelming experience of trauma or overwhelming experiences of stress prior to the age of 5 when we're thinking of developmental trauma, and complex trauma being the multiple and varied experiences, these can all impact a person's or a woman's ability to trust others others, right? And to also trust the experience of vulnerability. So things like parentification, where I have to take care of my younger siblings or have to take care of the caregivers or the adults, can be a cause. Other times you might see betrayal or abandonment, neglect, emotional abuse, or even over criticism, right? Because if I'm trying to protect myself from being over criticized or nitpick that, I might just learn to just rely on myself. The other piece is disappointment or inconsistency in parenting and caregivers, where they may be a promise to follow through on something and it doesn't happen, or there might even actually be danger in the parent way. Sometimes it's loving, sometimes it's danger. And so these lack of safety within relationships and within the lived experience, especially early on, can have a significant impact on our ability to trust others and to make us want to rely on ourselves more than any and everybody else.
Yeah, and what you just highlighted, L, is two things: safety and survival, right? So like being hyper independent is about like how can I keep myself safe from abuse, from neglect? How can I have a life that is more in my control, that's predictable? And how that is almost like a defense mechanism as we move throughout our daily lives. In your work at Lotus Trauma Care, can you share more about a little bit deeper about the connection to trauma and hyper independence?
Mhm. You hit it on the head, Kamisha. It's a defense mechanism, right? What we are seeing is that there are a lack of safety. So if we have a moral safety or social safety where we don't feel comfortable being ourselves or we cannot rely on our caregivers, especially early in life, attachment is very, very important. And so attachment is formed based off of how reliable are the caregivers or my parents. Do they show up for me? Can I tell them how I'm feeling? Do they acknowledge how I'm feeling? Do they shut it down when I have concerns or when I attempt to express my voice? Are they meeting my basic needs? So I have shelter, food, clothing, etc. Are they available emotionally? These different things can create an overwhelming experience of stress. And especially when we have our caregivers being the ones that are inconsistent or causing harm, then it makes it even harder to move through the world where it feels safe to have relationships with other people where we're relying on them. There are plenty of people who are experiencing hyperindependence who are like the most giving people in the world, and you would never really know that it was hyperindependence. But part of that giving is an attempt to be safe, right? Is an attempt to make sure that there is sometimes it's more of a transactional thing, and other times it's a way to make sure that everything is being addressed. Because the thought is, if I don't get it addressed or if I don't address it, then everything's going to just go and fall apart. The fire is going to spread around. So,
Yeah,
safe, really good piece. Think beyond it.
yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no worries, no worries. I think there was a little bit of delay, technology. But the other piece is that in addition to it protecting from disappointment, it also protects from those overwhelming emotions and discomfort that comes with this complex trauma or these experiences of not receiving the support and the love and the encouragement and consistency that all humans are deserving of. So I just wanted to add that that can kind of create and contribute to the experience of overwhelming stress, right? Trauma is a subjective experience. It looks different for everybody.
And how does, like you talked about the connection to trauma, what are some of the things that lead to it? How does it look in people's everyday lives? Like, if you were to describe a woman who may be operating in hyper independence, what would some of maybe those qualities or behaviors look like? There are some people I'm sure who are watching who may think that they're engaged in hyper independence, but they're maybe not know like all maybe the rundown of like all the qualities of what it would look like. Could you explain what that how you would see that show up in women?
So it can look like a combination or one or more of these things, taking on too much, right? Where the plate is full and consistently trying to do everything and be everything to everybody. And it might also be a challenge for just being vulnerable or acknowledging that I have emotions, acknowledging that I'm hurt. You might often say things like, oh, it is what it is, or you immediately jump to the solutions, or you immediately jump to how can I begin fixing the problem, right? So avoiding that vulnerability and discomfort that comes with that lack of predictability and consistency in things. Similarly, you might have challenges asking for help, right? Or even receiving help. So someone may offer you help and you're like, oh, no, it's fine. For whatever reason, there's a number of different reasons depending on your experiences, but not being able to receive and ask for help is often a telltale sign of hyperindependence because the hyperindependence is that overly reliant on self, right? Where it's like, I'm not allowed to be vulnerable. I'm not allowed to need anything from anyone else. And so having no sort of self talk or negative self talk, negative self criticism, where you're beating yourself up for being exhausted. You're beating yourself up for having a capacity being reached on this particular day, week, or month, right? Other times there might be relationship sabotage, rather that be within personal relationships or professional relationships, where there might be avoidance of closeness. There might be a rigidity in the way in which you're having conversations or you're engaging with people, or there might be only a certain face, if you were a mask that you're allowing other people to see because this was the safe one, right? You might even receive some guilt about receiving help. And so I'll use myself as an example. I recently became a mom and it became extremely, extremely, no, let's go back to pregnancy. When I first realized this hyper independence was like really, really, really a thing here. Not being able to pick things up and do things and at people offering help. I recall one day being in a store and someone offered to put water into the cart for me and I was in tears. I was so and I wanted to say no, but my physical capacity would not allow me the opportunity to do it myself. And so it really became evident that it can sometimes feel bad or feel uncomfortable receiving that help, even if we are able to ask for it or someone's offering it. There may even be this emotional detachment that can happen where we don't know about our feelings or don't recognize our feelings, something called intellectualization of our feelings. So I can tell you about why, my analysis of it, and everything. But that is a way to kind of distance the from the discomfort of intimacy and from the discomfort of vulnerability and needs, right? So it's this idea that if I don't have needs, if I'm always good, then I can't be disappointed, I can't be hurt, and I'm not in danger anymore. So those are a couple of ways that it might show up and reasons why and how we kind of links back to our experiences with trauma and over reliance on ourselves.
Those were all like great examples and the different ways that it shows up, like having trouble asking for help, feeling a struggle to be vulnerable, and to really feel like your feelings. It's something that I think is very, very, very commonplace for women and especially Black women where, asking for help, we may have been let down or we want to feel okay that we can handle things and protect ourselves. And the behaviors associated with being hyper independent all goes back to, experiences in the past, but also how do I keep myself safe? And vulnerability is the opposite of safety, for a lot of us. What are some steps that you think someone could take if they realize that they're engaging in hyper independence? And what I appreciate about what you shared with the systemic analysis, like we have these things happening in our families, we have the community level, systems, institutions, right, that can
Mhm.
contribute to engaging in hyper independence for survival and safety. But what would some of maybe the first steps look like for someone who knows, like, hey, I think I'm engaging in hyper independence. What can I do now to get help?
That's a really great question, Kanisha. And you made me think about just all the layers of historical trauma that go into this, right? But to your question, first thing is to choose your safe people. We're in a process of healing and we need repetitive, safe inter is super, super, super important. So safe people is number one. And just giving yourself small opportunities to ask for help. Maybe ask for something really simple, right? Like, could you let someone hand you a bottle of water, right? Maybe let them wash the dish for you when they visit your home. So just sometimes starting really small, it can also be a great way to begin helping your nervous system experience new wiring in the brain as we build on the neuroplasticity aspect of things. And then the other piece is this inner work, right? We kind of think about that repetition. So I use this 4-step process where it's common like in being in a gym, right? Or we're learning a new skill. We have to continuously repeat these things. So with hyper independence, it's often not a conscious choice that we're making. Oftentimes it's like an automatic thing that's happening or a belief system that's kind of driving things. So the first thing is to notice what emotions, circumstances, sensations, or thoughts trigger your hyper independence, right? What makes you feel like I have to show up for me? What makes you, excuse me, feel unsafe or feel as though you're about to be let down or something's going to happen that's going to recreate the fears that you're anticipating in the first place, right? And then, second, once you recognize what those circumstances are, you might notice a sensation, a thought, an emotion, particular patterns of different things. Like, for instance, if you notice that when you have a certain amount of money in your bank account, or maybe when you notice you got feedback from your supervisor, or you have to give a conflict with a colleague, right? Just kind of noticing what are the patterns of things that are triggering allows us to then, secondly, offer ourselves self compassion. I cannot overemphasize how important the self-compassion piece is in the process of healing from trauma is, and hyperindependence is just one small element of how trauma can show up. And so when we have compassion, it allows us the opportunity for things not to spiral, because that negative self-talk, being frustrated with ourselves for feeling, for needing, etc., can just exacerbate things or even perpetuate it. And so when we have the compassion, it gives us the opportunity to arrive to that third step of calming our nervous system down. And calming can look like a number of different things. So I kind of want to give a wide range so that different people can see themselves in it, right? But essentially, we're tapping into our ventral vagal nerve, which is the off switch of our autonomic nervous system. And the hyperindependence is a cue that your autonomic nervous system is activated, right? And so one thing you might do might be humming. Is if you're a singer, the melodies and humming, it sends ventral vagal cues to your ventral vagal nerve, your brain to calm, be calm. You might put something cold on your face or your lips, or we live in Chicago, so when it gets cold outside, you might open up the window and just let the freezing air hit your face, right? There might be a couple of different ways, especially when we're kind of feeling unmotivated, we're feeling kind of spacey or tapped out. Those can be some really cool ways. Breath work, or essentially doing different breathing techniques, can be helpful. Any form of movement, yoga, tai chi, exercising, running, dancing, can be helpful. Practicing things like gratitude and mindfulness. Gratitude is really helpful because fear or anxiety cannot be processed in the brain at the same time as gratitude. It also activates our pro-social networks, as well as helps to shrink the parts of the brain most impacted by trauma. And so gratitude is a really great way to help give that body an opportunity of calm. And so in these three steps, what's happening is that we're noticing the trigger, right? The neural pathway in the brain is actually being activated. And in offering ourselves compassion and choosing to calm it down, we're now creating a new off ramp in our brain, if you will, right? It's like our brain is on autopilot, and choosing to take these new ways gives us an off ramp so we can now, the fourth step, choose what we want to do, right? Where we can empower ourselves and integrate our previous skill sets and knowledge and successes to be able to engage in meaningful relationships, right? As adults, we have the choices to choose who we deal with, what we tolerate, who we're speaking with, how we're speaking to people, how they're speaking to us. So there's a really great opportunity to what they're calling reparent ourselves and taking these four steps.
Yeah, those were all like really tangible ways to begin to start like the healing process. I love what you said around self-compassion, and how like that can be so important, especially when we start to notice the triggers. Also, safe people, like I venture to say, and I don't know, I could be making too much of a generalization, but I think everybody has at least one safe person, in their lives. So identifying like who those people are is just a good starting place, because the repetition, like you said, the more we're able to practice the self compassion, we're able to get in touch with, like you said, our sensations, what's happening, what we're feeling when we want to engage in maybe doing something that's more hyper independent. And also being able to know that, like, the more we begin to practice, and honestly, it's a lot of undoing, right? Because with anything in our lives, whether it's our mental health, physical health, all the above, we have these habits that have been built in. And so there's like unlearning and kind of like relearning a new way to engage with yourself and the world. So I appreciate you for breaking that down in terms of how people can get started. If there are any women who are watching right now who know they're in the midst of hyper independence, who know that it's impacting their wellness, what advice or recommendations would you give to them?
Yes, first and foremost, give yourself compassion. right? You're taking the steps to heal. Maybe this is the first step and by tuning into this podcast, but it's not an easy process. And so I want to just normalize that it can be frustrating, it can be heavy, it can be challenging. If there's highs and lows, it's like a little roller coaster, but your future self will promise you for the work and the intention that you put into it. And you are deserving of support. You are deserving of help to be seen, to be validated and offered grace. And it begins with you offering yourself that.
Thank you. Thank you. That's really powerful. The self compassion and giving yourself grace and starting there. I think that's something that anybody can do to really begin their healing journey and get started with being able to move from hyper independence to interdependence. One last thing that I was just talking about, what does healthy independence look like? So we've talked about hyper independence, but if someone is practicing healthy independence, what would that look like?
Appreciation for that consideration, right? Where there is a reciprocity that is happening, rather that be through energy, rather that be through actually doing things for one another. But there is a system that's happening, an ecosystem where you both are feeling each other and receiving something from the relationship that you all have with each other, right? And that can be tangible or intangible.
Yeah, thank you for uplifting that. Because as we were talking, I was like, we didn't talk about healthy independence, what that looks like, and also interdependence. The last question that I have for you is, what does healthy interdependence look like for women?
Mhm. One, leaning on our sisterhood and or whomever is in your circle, your support system, being able to lean on each other and normalize and validate that, right? Being able to show up for each other without expectations of something in return. I think it's another really important thing that kind of happens in interdependence as well. And then for women as well, I think it's important to recognize what is our responsibility, what is the responsibility of our loved ones, right? Because oftentimes there's a bit of a overlap where we're taking an unhealthy aspect of things. Sometimes we can take on too much of other people's stuff, and hyperindependence can then also be accompanied with codependency where we're now just completely overwhelmed. So the happy independence definitely recognizes that I can be a support, but I am not responsible for you and your healing.
Yeah, I love that. I can be support, but I'm not responsible. And I think many women feel responsible for other people instead of I am a support. So I love the way that you broke that down. So, where can people find you if they're looking to heal from hyper independence? Tell us how they can get connected to your practice, and then anything else that you want to share about your work around this topic.
I want to thank you for holding this space and having this important conversation. And thank you all for tuning in now and afterwards. If you are interested in learning more, you can visit us a number of different ways. I'll drop the link tree in here somehow. Kamisha's going to help us with that, where we have everything in one place. But we do have YouTube channels for free resources for yourself to learn more about these things and how trauma shows up, the stress response system, how we're activated, different ways we can calm the system and begin that inner healing work. You can also on that list there find out about different trauma resources. So we have a trauma store that has resources that are for toolkits for your client to be used with clients, or you can use with yourself, as well as curriculum as well for group sessions with youth, as well as group sessions for women who are impacted by domestic violence, parenting, trauma informed parenting, right? Especially I come from the child welfare background. And so kind of, making sure we're healing this childhood trauma is so important and so such a dear passion of mine. LotusTraumaCare.com is our website. We do have a Facebook and Instagram, and then we also have a LinkedIn page. I love connecting with like-minded people, organizations, and leaders. So please connect with me on LinkedIn, DM me, let's link up and have a conversation, whether it be virtually or in person. This work there's enough to go around. And I believe that there's a lot of great things happening in the social service and healthcare industries. And as we as professionals begin to heal, we also have a trickle effect on the communities we're serving. So thank you for having me today and being able to talk about this amazing and important discussion.
Well, thank you so much, Elle. I appreciate everything that you shared. Even if you're watching this right now, go back and listen to it again, right? Because Elle just dropped so many gems about what does hyper independence look like? How do we move from safety and survival to healthy independence to interdependence? and what does the healing process look like, and how we can begin implementing these in-depth tools to be able to experience a lighter life, right? So the last thing that I'll share is in 2 weeks on September 11th, I'm doing my last live in my power series, and it's going to be the power of mental resilience. So we've talked a lot about, resilience particularly has gotten a little bit more criticism over the past couple of years, particularly as it may relate to the experiences of Black people. I do want to also lift up some of the positive aspects of mental resilience and how it can be a powerful strategy and a powerful healing tool during this time that we're in right now, which is unprecedented. So every 2 weeks, I will be here for Moving Beyond Burnout. Thank you so much, Shantae Worsham L, for being our guest. And subscribe to the Moving Beyond Burnout newsletter on LinkedIn. I drop a newsletter about every 2 weeks about the topic for the live stream, but also other information that I think can be helpful in your healing journey from burnout. So, thank you all again for turning in. Take care and be well.